Welcome back. Here with my good friend and colleague in ministry, Reverend Paul Thompson of Huntersville United Methodist Church. Steve Autry here from Denver United Methodist Church. We are, as always, privileged to be a part of your life. Thank you for giving us this time. And thank you for listening and being a part of what we're doing here with this video podcast series that we do week to week. So, Pastor Paul, how did things go at Huntersville this past weekend?
Man, I think people were saved in droves.
They were, yeah.
Their lives were transformed and changed. I hope so. It's the conversation was around music and the ways that we experience God through music. And, in so many ways, that really is a lot of people's primary way. Mm-hmm. I think music really is such an important influence in the life of people and their faith. I said it, and I've said it before, and say it again. They may forget what a sermon said by the time they get to the car, but all week long they're going to be singing that song of faith that really resonated with them and sticks with them. Music is so tied to memory. It's crazy how that works, and so I think if nothing else, a good reminder that music really is the language of the soul.
You're poetic.
I'm just amazing myself. I'm just like scary.
Wow. Like, I think I read that in a Helen Steiner Rice card once upon a time. So good job, Paul.
Yeah, I'm going to start writing for Hallmark cards, I think, any minute. Can I make some coffee?
Yes, you think you should. But no, I think it does affect us in a way that it's a language that, we're so used to written word. We're used to emails. We're used to spoken communication. Music, it just triggers a different part of our being, and physiologically it does trigger a different part of our brain.
Yeah, I'm sure it has been mentioned that people who have been damaged in one part of their brain, and so they maybe not even be able to speak, and yet they can sing, and that's just a phenomenon for me. I just love the way that works. So music is a primary influencer. Mm-hmm. And shaper and ways that we experience God. And we're going to look at a different way we experience God this week, which is prayer, which is one of the primary spiritual disciplines that we have. Spiritual disciplines, spiritual practices, means of grace. It's the ways that God connects with us. You want to just help us understand what a means of grace is? So a means of grace is an ordinary channel, an ordinary way that God speaks,
an
established God communicates, an established way. In the United Methodist tradition, we typically hold those ordinary means of grace, the sacraments, prayer, Scripture. We talk about holy conferencing as a way
conversation.
Holy conversation. So there are any number of ordinary means. Occasionally God breaks out of the ordinary and communicates to us in extraordinary ways, but primarily we think about prayer as a means of grace, an ordinary channel of God's communicating to us, an ordinary way that God speaks into our lives in ways that we can both comprehend and understand.
No doubt you most likely go to the same grocery store every week, right? That's your ordinary go-to to get the resources you need. Prayer is one of those things. It's an ordinary means of grace. It's a go-to, and it's reliable, and it's been proven true. So as we talk about prayer this week, how we connect to God through prayer, how God, maybe more importantly, connects back to us, we're going to be taking a look at the person of Daniel. What do you know about Daniel, besides its good name?
Yeah, it's a good name. One of the fascinating things about the Scriptures is once you start to recognize the historicity of the context.
Say that word again?
Historicity.
Wow, yeah. That's pretty impressive. They teach you that at Auburn?
At Auburn and well, probably maybe more at Erskine. I don't know.
Right, okay.
But it's the idea that Daniel was living in exile. He was in a land that was not his own. Right. He had been, his predecessors, ancestors had been drugged off into this place, godforsaken, considered pagan, considered awful, and yet Daniel and others survived, and the faith actually thrived. We believe that often the Scriptures actually began to be written down during this time of exile.
When they become, pen to paper, and the stories told and retold, so that those who are far away from their home, far away from what used to be the temple, remember, can hold on to what they value, so that they don't lose their identity.
Yeah, the whole idea of being surrounded by a culture that is antagonistic to your faith and still trying to hold on, still trying to be true to those things that you know are right, that's really at the heart of this story of Daniel.
So Daniel brought into exile, and what the Babylonians would do they would kind of pick the cream of the crop of the conquered countries, and they would literally use them as human resources. Some, I mean, if you were strong, you might become a slave and be put to work digging ditches and building buildings. If you were really smart, you may be put to work in the imperial structure as
administrative capacity.
Daniel was one of these really smart people. He ends up being put into administrative role, and he quickly proves himself as being an exceptionally bright and apt and capable young man, and he rises through the ranks.
You'd have been one of those administrative. I'd have been out in the field, man. You picked that blog up and carried it over here. You'd have been in the castle.
Yeah, the castle. That's me. I'm castle material.
You're castle material.
I'm more palace. He's more pond. So the idea there is that as Daniel rises through the ranks, the other people in the court, they get jealous. Right. Mm. I mean, Daniel is proven, and Scripture is very clear. God is blessing Daniel. God is faithful to Daniel, and Daniel is faithful back to the God of Israel. Mm. And the blessings show up, and the those around Daniel. If you've ever been in any type of, I mean, you all have been there, work structure, where people get jealous about who gets promotions and who gets what office and who gets what role. Well, that starts to happen, and especially it's made that much worse because Daniel's an outsider.
And so as Daniel tries to live in this culture, he is faced with a really difficult choice. How do I stay true to my faith? How do I hold on to the laws, to the things that have defined his life in the midst of a culture that both doesn't understand and is, again, antagonistic toward it? And so prayer becomes Daniel's focus. Mm-hmm. Daniel becomes a person of prayer who believes that it is through prayer that he can stay faithful to God.
So a plot is hatched against Daniel. One, there's a change in leadership from Belshazzar, who promoted Daniel all the way up to rank of third in the kingdom, according to Daniel chapter 5. And then Darius becomes king. Darius is certainly known to world history very well, one of the big names in world history. So Darius comes to the throne, and so the those around Daniel, his competition, I doubt Daniel sees them as competition, but they see him as competition, set a trap for him. And they go to Darius because they know that Daniel is faithful. They know that Daniel prays to the God of Israel. And the proclamation basically says, and I'll just read it. Here's Daniel chapter 6. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps stationed throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 presidents, including Daniel. To these the satraps gave account to the king might suffer no loss. Soon Daniel distinguished himself above all the other presidents and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to appoint him over the whole kingdom. So the presidents and the satraps tried to find grounds for complaint against Daniel in connection with the kingdom, but they could find no grounds for complaint or any corruption because he was faithful, and no negligence or corruption could be found in him. The men said, "We shall not find any ground for complaint unless we find it in connection with the law of his God."
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe we can pick that point up tomorrow and further the conversation around Daniel and just what a real pickle he was in.
Yeah.
Because when people are out to get you, when it feels like that you're trying to do the right thing and everybody else around you seems to be plotting against you, I guess that's when we really define who we are.
Yeah, that is. And when Daniel could have done any number of things. right? And I'm sure Daniel, being a smart guy, knew he was in that pickle, and he saw the trap coming, no doubt. So we're going to take up tomorrow what Daniel does as we continue this, with this great story.
Thank you for your time as always. We will look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
All right, thank you.